Okay.
All right, now we're recording, we're cooking, we're juice now. Thank you. Okay, so our discussion today is called The Impact of Food on Our Mood. And we're going to be looking at some practical actions to cultivate a healthier lifestyle. And those of you who have been in sessions with me before know that we're going to do a whole sort of get a little physiology in here because I think that that's real important that we have an understanding about how our bodies work and how what is the relationship that we have physiologically with food, and then we'll build that to how it may impact our mood. All right, so this is what we did. We got in the mood with our little centering exercise. The body-mind connection. Human beings live in three internal worlds: thought, feeling, and emotions. Thoughts can trigger physical sensations in the body or feelings, and our ability to cope with the feelings we have is expressed as our emotions. Emotions are the judgments we accept in order to cope with our feelings. Once we make a judgment about a feeling we have, we settle on an attitude that influences our thinking. A cycle begins. What influences our thoughts? I know we all like to think that we are in control of our thoughts. However, there are many things in our environment that influence and affect our thoughts. And physiologically speaking, our serotonin levels. The organ systems of our bodies are held together by a common thread. This is also known as our energy system, or the process by which the systems communicate together through neurotransmission and the endocrine or hormone functions. Our central nervous system, better known as our brain, uses neurotransmission to communicate, and it's influenced by direct experience or our family culture, by society, by education, by the media, by our beliefs, and our diet. Our enteric nervous system, and that's also known as our digestive system or the gut, it also communicates through neural transmissions as well as through hormones and is directly influenced by diet, exercise, environmental factors, and our thoughts. Basically, our central nervous system and the enteric nervous system influence one another. As with all of our body systems, they're interconnected. So, what is serotonin and how and why does it affect us? Serotonin is a hormone chemical that works as a neurotransmitter. Scientific research findings, they find evidence that suggests that serotonin may be responsible for maintaining our mood balance, our social behavior, our appetite and digestion, sleep, memory, sexual desire, and sexual function. Serotonin's role in the central nervous system and the enteric nervous system leads researchers to conclude that it's a neurotransmitter. However, its long-term effect on our metabolic function leads some researchers to conclude that it acts more like a hormone. Serotonin is produced in the brain as well as in our gut or GI. 80 to 90% of the serotonin that we have in our body is produced in our digestive system. Since the enteric nervous system, which we call our second brain, is known to influence our mood, behavior, appetite, and digestion, its influence on our lives is significant. So, as you can see from the slide, that when we have these optimal serotonin levels, we might feel more hopeful and optimistic, calm, good natured, patient, creative, responsible, sleep well, which is what we often recognize as with serotonin. We often hear that in relationship to our sleep. And when we have low serotonin levels, we might feel depressed, anxious, irritable, impatient. We might fly off the handle, be very reactive, right? Have insomnia, and maybe crave sweets, okay? Because those things that are going to make us feel better. There are a number of lifestyle and dietary factors that influence our mood and, physiologically speaking, our serotonin levels. And here are a few general factors: stress, poor diet, lack of exercise, sunlight or lack thereof, our own mood and attitude. And we're going to look at each one of these individually as we build towards food. So factor number one, stress. When we have stress, we can have an excess cortisol. And when we have excess cortisol in our body, it decreases our serotonin in the brain, and that's what affects our mood. The stress response can also produce a vicious cycle in our body because the hormone or chemical messengers that respond to stress also influence how we think, feel, and react emotionally. The stress response also influences weight management, as increased cortisol will influence our weight gain, and this impacts our habit for handling stress like overeating, sleeping, and becoming lethargic because we're not exercising. This is a big one now. So our dietary choices. But before beginning any discussion on diet choices, let's consider the what and why of food. What is it? Nature provides us with the source of life to sustain our lives, and we call this food, or as it's defined by the American Heritage Dictionary, any material, usually of plant or animal origin, that contains or consists of these essential nutrients that we take in order to maintain life and growth. Food is nature's gift of health. The life-giving source of foods are its nutrients or chemical compounds. This nutrients or nourishment, it integrates with our human biochemistry, and the union between the nutrients in food and human biochemistry affects every organ system within our body. And this is what helps us to lead towards having a more healthier lifestyle, or not. We must learn the value of eating to live. We must eat first for nourishment and pleasure second. Most of us eat in the opposite direction. So unfortunately, here in the Western culture, we have what is known as the standard American diet. So here's some statistics for us to consider in our standard American diet. 63% of America's calories, what we eat, most of us, comes from refined and processed food. For example, soft drinks, packaged snacks like potato chips, desserts, those kinds of things. 25% of American calories comes from animal-based foods. That's chicken, beef, hamburger, fish. 12% of the American calories comes from plant-based foods, but 6% of that is from French fries. We consider that a vegetable. That means only 6% of American calories comes from health-promoting foods like vegetables, whole grains, nuts, and seeds. There's a good reason why we abbreviate the standard American diet as SAD. The standard American diet leads to standard American diseases that leads to standard American morbidity, okay? 70% of the food in today's typical diet here in the West was things that our ancestors did not eat. And that's like cereals and pastas, all these dairy products that we now eat, the fact that we add salt, we refine our vegetable oils, we add sugar, and we eat a lot of fatty meats. And this basic change in our food supply has moved us towards diets that really are comorbidities for things like diabetes, gout, hypertension, arthritis, autoimmune diseases, and mood. Affects our mood. So there's an Ayurvedic saying, and Ayurveda is the sister science for yoga. And this is a wonderful Ayurvedic saying that says, taste is to the body as emotion is to the mind. Our sense of smell and taste are powerful entry points to the brain and central nervous system. The human olfactory system has more than 12 million smell receptors located through the nose and nasal cavities. These sense receptors, they're known as dendrites, they actually touch brain matter. Smell can evoke strong emotional reactions. Our olfactory receptors are directly connected to the limbic system, the most ancient and primitive part of the brain, which is thought to be the seat of our emotions. The limbic system includes the amygdala, which is involved in emotional learning, and the hippocampus, an important brain structure for memory. The olfactory nerve is closely connected to the hippocampus. Thus, this is what influences our memories about certain foods. Adding memories to our emotion leads to firm memories being embedded on our mind. Smell sensations are relayed to the cortex, where cognitive recognition occurs. So only after the deepest part of our brains have been stimulated do we get to embed those memories into our brains, which then become emotions. So by the time we correctly name a particular scent, like say, for example, vanilla, that scent has already been activated in the limbic system, triggering more deep-seated emotional responses. And this is what leads to us actually having cravings, because we have memories based on smell alone, right? That get embedded into our memory systems. And we actually have we will remember a situation where we ate something that we liked, or like we were talking earlier, just the fact that we have these wonderful memories about eating with our families on whatever those holidays or celebrations are, and just the scents and the smells themselves will trigger these wonderful emotions. And the opposite can happen as well. So with that, consider this: the media uses aroma to sell stuff. Smell triggers memories that will stimulate us to buy certain products. So for example, I don't know if you've noticed this, but I do. Scents are added to pages in magazines that attract us and increase the sales. Cinnabon that you find at the mall, they intentionally locate their kiosks outside of the food court. They're usually not with the other foods. They're somewhere else in the mall, outside of the food court, to draw the patrons in. And they do that because they're wafting this smell of sugar and cinnamon spice at the opposite end of the mall. And you'll see a line beeline to their particular kiosk. Taste and smells are both senses that react to the chemicals in food, and the oral and nasal cavities are directly connected. So it's not a surprise that these two senses are closely linked. When these senses work together, they identify the chemicals in food or drink, and then we develop what we know as a flavor. Flavor is a sensation that uses many senses all at once. It's sort of this amalgam of things. It's taste, it's texture, it's temperature, and it's smell of whatever we're eating. So when we think about a particular flavor, it's all of these things sort of rolled up into one that gives us this sense of smell. Now, the two main tastes in the standard American or our SAD diet are salty and sweet. The diet is designed to use both flavors at one time. And you'll notice this if you go to any fast food restaurant. These are the two main tastes that you're going to see: salty and sweet. If you have a hamburger and French fries, the French fries are going to be salty, but they're on this potato that technically is a carbohydrate, so it's sweet. So there's the mixture right there. And even the hamburger, meat is considered towards the sweet taste, and it's on a bun, okay? So you're getting those two, sweet and salty tastes all the time. We're gonna look at both of them separately, the two different tastes, and then we'll bring them together. Table salt is not simply sodium. It contains other ingredients like anti-caking chemicals, and guess what? Sugar. Salt cravings may be our body's need for the other minerals that are naturally found in unrefined sea salt, but are now lacking in the processed foods that we eat. So, if we think that we're craving something salty, our bodies might be telling us that we need something else. Salt it alkalizes the pH. So if we're moving towards a more acidic balance in our metabolic system, then we can have cravings for salt itself. Okay, particularly if we are eating a lot of sugar. So It's interesting that even though we're eating a lot of sugar, that can make our metabolic system more acidic, believe it or not, more acid baked, so it's lowering our pH. And salt, then we might begin to crave that in order to balance it out. An old kitchen science wisdom is adding salt to cooking water when we're doing grains or pastas. So, if you remember, you would put that pinch of salt in there, and that is so that it would restore the balance to the pH of that starchy water that would happen when we're making grains and rices and potatoes and those kinds of things. We really do not need to add salt to our food. Natural sodium is found in most foods like eggs, seafood, green leafy vegetables, and in all meats. Now with sugar, there's a lot of politics as well as culture surrounding sugar. And I just finished reading this wonderful book by Michael Twitty. It's called The Cooking Gene, A Journey Through African-American Culinary History in the Old South. And in his book, he states that according to some estimates, about 80% of all the captives brought to the Americas were brought to regions where sugarcane was the main crop. No sugar, no slavery. The average American consumes approximately 130 pounds of sugar each year. That's a whole person. Too much sugar affects us like alcohol. It may lead to dehydration, electrolyte imbalance, GI disturbances, and disruption of sleep as some of the examples. Excess sugar leads to overgrowth of bacteria, which is like a yeast, that when chronic can cause skin disruptions, allergic reaction, digestive upsets, and joint pain due to the chronic inflammation that occurs when we eat too much sugar. Sugar is not only table sugar, but refined processed foods that metabolize as sugar in your body. This increased blood sugar levels, that affects our insulin levels. And when we have too much of the insulin hormone coming through our body, it will stress the pancreas and the kidneys, and this ultimately affects our cardiovascular system because all of the systems communicate and talk with one another. The basic recommendation for adding any sweetener is to use the least concentrated sweet and the one most nearest to whole foods. For example, rice syrups or barley malt. There are great examples, and because they also have extra nutrients and they take longer to digest, okay, so they can help to balance blood sugar. Maltose is 1/3 as sweet as white sugar, and it's the best added sugar to use. And we can find maltose in things like barley malt, peaches, and pear juice. Another incident that can happen when we have too much salt and sugar is that we actually become nutrient deficient. And there is a chronic consideration we have to have if we're dining on the standard American diet, is that even though we think that we might appear to be a healthy weight or even overweight, we're really nutrient deficient because we're not getting the nutrients that we need. In particular, vitamin D, the B6 and 12 vitamins, folic acid, iron, essential fatty acids, they can actually alter our brain function and mood when we are deficient in them. Overall, the deficiencies in any or all of these nutrients may lead to cycles of depression, irritability, and anxiety. Other behavioral effects specific to vitamin deficiency are apathy, anxiety, depression, restlessness, fatigue, forgetfulness, apathy, confusion, lassitude. You can see the list is here. So anywhere from really having mild emotional and mood issues to some really extremes. So factor number 3 is the lack of exercise. And when we do not exercise, we actually build toxins in the body that can make us feel worse. A lack of circulation includes a lack of circulation of your thoughts. We are more likely to keep dwelling on negative thoughts when we don't move. Fresh blood to the brain equals fresh oxygen, and fresh thoughts increases our mood. Various communities and clinical studies have clearly indicated that exercise has profound effects on antidepressive effects. These studies have shown that an increased participation in exercise, sports, and physical activities is strongly associated with decreasing the symptoms of anxiety and depression. People who participate in regular exercise have higher self-esteem, they feel better, and they're much happier than people who do not exercise. Why? Because when we exercise, we increase endorphins, and that's our natural opioid that is produced in our brain, and that gives us some relief from the stress, as well as some relief from pain. Lack of sunlight. So this is really interesting. In the modern lifestyle, we have moved away from spending time outdoors, right? So what's really interesting is that during the pandemic, okay, actually before the pandemic, the average person spent only 8% of their life outside, okay? 74.1% of their time was spent inside at home or at work, and 13% indoors at other locations. 5.5% we were spending time in our vehicles. So that was before the pandemic. So, now it's by far a whole lot worse. But I'd like you to consider this. If the sun's energy is the source of life for plants, earth, and animals, why would we human beings not be affected by a lack of sunlight? This is the disconnect from nature that we are experiencing. And we need to recognize that we are part of nature and that we need to tune in, just like the other participants here, plants and animals, go out and get our vitamin D. Sunlight is supported by vitamin D, and it also is what stimulates melatonin in our body. It stimulates our skin, it stimulates our eyesight, and ultimately it stimulates our mood. We need our sun. Oh, sorry, I'm going back. Skipped one, sorry. Okay, so just factor number 5, let's look at our mood and our attitude. A positive mental attitude is the real foundation for optimal health. Mood is described as a prolonged emotional tone that dominates an individual's outlook. One's mood fluctuates throughout the course of a day, week, month, or season. When a certain mood or mood continues chronically over a period of time, its dominance begins to control our behavior and our abilities and affects what and how we eat. So we know that pharmaceuticals can alter our brain chemistry and thus alter our mood. However, helping folks to gain more control over their lives is actually a better way to produce these biochemical changes that we get when we look to take it out of a pill. So one of the most powerful techniques for producing these natural biochemical brain things or changes in our brain is to begin to teach people how to be more optimistic. We know that when we're working with our children, this is something that we're constantly striving for them to do, is to understand what they're feeling, how to express it, and then to find other ways to take on other different moods itself. Optimistic people are less likely to feel hopeless or depressed. Pessimistic people are more likely to feel hopeless and depressed. So now let's look at some specific strategies and activities we can use to support cultivating this healthier lifestyle. And we're going to look at each one, but we're going to start with the health promoting diet, because that's the focus of what we're on today. And then I'll touch on the other ones briefly. So our relationship with food, we talked about this when we were introducing ourselves, are deeply rooted in our culture and in our family. We associate many emotions with food: love, sensuality, pleasure, melancholy, and sometimes guilt, disdain, and fear. What we eat has a direct impact on our mood. So now let's think about it. If we have these two brains, our central nervous system and our enteric nervous system or our digestive system, they're linked together physiologically, then it makes sense that they would be linked together energetically. How many of you know folks who stop eating when they are upset? And how many of you know folks who eat when they get upset, eat when they're happy, eat when they're angry, eat when they're frustrated? So interesting, our brains, these two brains, our digestive system, as well as the brain between our ears, they build memory. So an emotion that was satisfied by a particular food we eat while we were experiencing an emotion, it can become a memory. If we experience a particular emotion over and over again and we feel the need to comfort ourselves, almost unconsciously, we will reach for that particular food that made us feel the feeling come or the feeling go away. So I can give you an example. I associate the taste of ice cream with summers in when I was a little girl, and the ice cream man came. It's just something that certain times of the year when I just want to have a vanilla ice cream cone, because that's what I associate being summertime, being young, being free, running outside and having a good time, right? So I don't necessarily want to eat it all the time, but I do have times of the year when I'm reaching for some vanilla ice cream because it reminds me that it's summertime and I'm going to be free and it's going to make me happy. I have another craving where if it's the middle of the day and I'm having, I've been working all day and working my brain in front of the computer, and then I feel myself getting slumpy, then I might automatically, mindlessly go and reach for a candy bar, okay? Because in my memory somewhere, subconsciously, I know that that hit of sugar is going to give me some instant energy. And so I don't even think about it, I just reach for it. This is some of the examples. But the other thing we have to consider when we're thinking about what affects mood and food and why we might crave is that a lot of this is market driven. And we know this with children, right? So they are watching television all day and certain commercials, they will automatically ask their mom for McDonald's or Dunkin' Donuts or whatever they see because of the advertising and the way that it plays. And if you want to do an experiment, watch television at certain times of the day and you'll notice what type of food um, ads are given at certain points of the day. If you're watching a football game, you're going to get the beer ads, right? And you also get things like chips and fast food. And then if it's around dinner time and you're watching the nightly news, you're going to find more ads around uh, what do you call those, instant dinners or things like that, things that parents or moms can make in the kitchen that are fast dinner, and you'll see these beautiful pictures of families sitting around eating whatever mom has put in the microwave. So we have to also consider how we're being marketed when we're thinking about the effects of food on our mood. Okay, a health promoting diet provides optimal levels for all of the nutrients and low levels of foods that are low in these things that are not so good for us, like sugar, fats, cholesterol, salt, and food additives. So when we're thinking about, I want to make some changes to my diet, what should I do? Well, you want to think about, be more mindful about what we're eating and know exactly what we're taking in. The average adult, the optimal diet for them is between 1,800 and 2,000 calories a day, and that's for an active adult. During COVID-19, most of us are not as active as we were, and so we don't require so much food. Food is fuel, we don't need as much. So sedentary adults, okay, meaning that we're not moving as much, we need maybe between 1,200 and 1,500 calories a day, if not less. We also want to consider quality versus quantity. So you want to make your calories count. Even though half of an avocado is 130 calories with 12 grams of fat and 1 gram of protein and maybe 5 grams of sugar, and a slice of deli turkey as comparison might be 29 calories with 5 grams of protein and 1 gram of sugar, the quality of that avocado outweighs the quantity of the deli meat. that also has a lot of food additives and other things that are not so good for us. So choose your foods wisely. And then also you might want to do this little experiment for yourself. Before you reach for something to eat or drink, ask yourself these 3 questions. Is this food or drink going to increase my energy levels? Is this food or drink going to make excellent building material for my body temple? Is this food or drink going to help cure any diseases I might have or prevent them? And I love this quote by Michael Pollan. He's the author of one book called The Omnivore's Dilemma. He's written several. He says, eat food, not too much, and mostly plants. Okay. And by food, Michael means whole foods. A plant-based diet, it's a pattern where you're eating primarily plant food. Okay. It's fruits and vegetables, but also nuts and seeds and oils and whole grains and legumes and beans. It doesn't necessarily mean that you become a vegetarian and that you never eat meat or dairy, but rather proportionally, we're choosing more foods from plant sources. And sometimes some of the main concerns when we're thinking about a plant-based diet is this concept of protein. And what's interesting again with advertising is whatever is on the market that needs to be sold the most. So currently it's eat more protein and less carbs, or yeah, that's been a big one. And it's what kind of proteins you're eating, lean meats or whatever. So it's really wise to start tuning into your body and seeing what works best for it. Every food that we eat has carbohydrates in it. So when we say carbs, we often are lumping those complex um, grains primarily, and we call those carbs, but all foods have carbohydrates in them, so that you know that. Okay. And not every food has proteins in them, but there are plenty that do, that we don't just necessarily have to reach for a piece of flesh to think that that's the only way that we're going to get some protein. And often the concern about eating plant versus meat protein is the balance of amino acids. And that's true because not all plant-based proteins have all of the essential amino acids that we need as meat does. And so we'd have to make sure that I have a good balance of those to make sure that we get them into our diets. All right, but there are many ways that we can start eating a little bit better for ourselves. And here's some tips for you to do that. You can eat a lot of vegetables. So this is thinking a little differently. And that means like filling half of your plate with vegetables at lunch and dinner, and make sure that there's plenty of colors that you're choosing from. Okay, you might even want to enjoy vegetables as a snack with hummus, salsa, or guacamole. You want to change the way you think about meat. Have smaller amounts. Use it as a garnish instead of a centerpiece. Choose some of the good fats when we're eating. And those good fats are more like vegetable oils, olives, nuts, nut butters, seeds, and avocados are really good sources of fat. Our bodies need fat. There really are no foods that are necessarily bad for us. It's when we make choices and we habituate on the same things over and over again and not giving ourselves a variety of things in order to get all of the nutrients we need that gets us into trouble. So it's okay to have some good old fats. You also might want to just try to have a vegetarian meal at least once a week. Say something like a meatless Mondays. And then you can build your whole meal around things like beans and whole grains and vegetables, and give yourself a break from eating, again, habituating on the same things that you eat all the time. You may want to include whole grains. If you're a breakfast eater, have some whole grains in the morning. Start with like whole grain oatmeal or quinoa, maybe some buckwheat or barley, and then you can add some seeds to that and maybe some fresh fruits. Always, every day, do your best to go for the greens and try a variety of green leafy vegetables such as bok choy, Swiss chard, spinach, and other greens every day. So this is the season where the community supported agriculture, the CSAs are beginning, And if you haven't, or going to the farmer's market is another way if you don't want to commit to a CSA. But what I like about it is that it forces us to eat in season, okay? Eat locally and in season. And at the beginning of the season, it's nothing but greens, right? That's all you're gonna get, nothing but greens. And so you get to try some good, delicious new things. And you can steam them, braise them, stir fry them, do a variety of different things with them. The other thing is, now as we're moving into the colder, sorry, the warmer months in the summer, you can build a whole meal around a salad. But again, this is a summertime thing. So when we're in the early spring and the winter and in the fall, we might want to have this concept around building it around a soup pot, so to speak, because in the summertime, when it's warmer, your body can rev up and it can afford to support the digestion of some raw vegetables. Whereas when it's colder, we want to keep that digestive fire working. And so we want to have more warm food. And then, of course, when I eat a lot of fruits. Okay, I'm hearing people dropping off. So sorry if I'm getting distracted here because I can't see you. All right, then we want to find some flavor. So when we're thinking about changing our palate and wanting to eat better, herbs and spices add more than just flavor to the food. They also have some medicinal value too. So if you think about something like when we're making a big pot of soup, when we're moving in all of those beautiful vegetables, or even if you're making chicken soup and building your broth, we're actually adding more vitamins and minerals to that broth, and we're bringing in the herbs and spices that will actually enhance digestion, as well as to give the food some flavor and to make it pretty good for you. You see here, I have a few benefits here that when we're thinking about fermented foods like vinegars, those actually are probiotics or prebiotics, and they help to build that microbiome within our digestive system. When we're adding vegetable broths or different broths, we're getting vitamins and minerals, and that can be an alternative to just having some sodium in the foods that we eat. Again, when you think about the fresh herbs like all the aromatics, oregano, thyme, sage, those particular rosemary, those aromatic ones, they all are antimicrobial and they help to support digestion. Then when we think about adding things like fruit juices and coconut milk, those not only give us a little sweet taste, but they also have their own level of vitamins and natural sweetness that can support bringing us more flavor to our food. And here's another list of spices we have down here. All right, so then I have some samples here of some breakfast, lunch, and dinner recipes that we can try. Again, you'll get a copy of this. So if you want to give a few of these ideas a try, you can. There's 3 different meals here for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and you can mix and match them. I won't read through them, but you can just give those a try when you see them. And then one of the handouts that I gave you, which is this meal planning tip sheet. And so I'm going to explain how the tip sheet works. I believe that you got a copy of it, and if you didn't, we'll go over it. So basically what I did was, and this is kind of small, but you'll see it, I did a meal plan for different caloric intakes during the day, 1,200 calories, 15, 18, and 22. And what I did was I gave you a formula for that. So this page, it says 1,200, I think you have 12 and 15 here. So you'll see it says, well, what does that look like? So if I want to eat 1,200 calories a day, it looks like I'm going to have 1 protein, a fruit or a vegetable for breakfast, a protein, a vegetable, a leafy green, and an optimal condiment for lunch, a protein, a grain, 2 vegetables, and a leafy green for dinner. And then my stack might be a protein, snack, and 1 fruit or vegetable. So I give you the formula, and then I give you an example of what that would look like. So for breakfast, I'll just give you that example. You see it says 1 protein, 1 fruit or vegetable. That means maybe I'd have 1 cup of plain low-fat kefir yogurt drink, that's your protein, and 1 cup of mixed fresh berries. Okay, so you see then you get a formula, and I do that for each one of these menus or caloric menus here. And then I give you some examples of each one of the different types of foods that they are. So when I say have a protein and you're like, oh, well, what does she mean by that? You can come to the back page of that particular tip sheet and you'll see I have a list of proteins here, from plant-based proteins to meat-based proteins, a list of grains, some samples of vegetables and leafy greens. Of course, there are many more. These happen to be my favorites, a list of fruits that you might want to try. And then when I have like the snacks or the condiments down here, I give examples of what that looks like if you're having a protein condiment. Usually I'm talking more like salad dressings or oils and et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so that you have your menus where you can break it down, and then you can come to the back of your tip sheet and choose your vegetables, or you can choose from your sources of foods here. And I also have some recipes. So if you're really interested and you're stumped and you're like, I really just need some recipes, let me know. And I can send you some of those too. All right, so as we wrap this up, we want to talk about the need to exercise regularly. So as we discussed earlier, exercise is key to supporting your mood. Exercising regularly will elevate your mood by physically supporting detoxification and elimination of toxins from your body, and that can impact how we feel, as well as increase the circulation in our body, which gives us more energy. And for those of us who fret over our BMI, optimal weight management is really mathematics. The calories that we eat are fuel, okay? We have to use them. The more calories we take in, the more we have to use. If we don't use the calories that we take in or that fuel, then it gets stored in our body, okay, as fat. So take it slow. Know that 1 ounce of weight loss equals 250 calories burned. Okay, so set small steps for yourself and be consistent. Consistency is key. Try not to have big unrealistic goals, because when we don't meet our goals, when we have these big unrealistic goals, then we give up and then we're back in that slump and we've in a bad mood again. So take it slow. The other key here is really the necessity to establish some quiet time for some mindfulness. Quiet time is reflection, and that really helps to sustain a healthy lifestyle over time. Quiet reflection can move us away from the end result action oriented Western view of life, right? To being more intentional about our actions, being present in everything that we do and not focusing just on the outcome. Something like yoga, which is what a lot of us practice, it can help you cultivate a practice of seeing things more clearly and realistically. And it also helps embrace who you truly are, flaws and all. Your flaws are a part of the rainbow that is you. Right? In yoga, we say we're imperfectly perfect, right? Or perfectly imperfect. So this practice of yoga can guide you into your body and tune you into those sensations throughout your whole body. So we stop living from just the neck up. Yoga helps to stretch and tone all of the major muscle groups of the body as well, and it helps to optimize our breathing. And that also can help us feel more alert and elevate our mood. When we have a mindfulness practice, it can teach us to be the observer of our life and not just the reactor in our life. And mindfulness practice can help us break the habit of conditional responses. So as you move more into your mindfulness practice, you become more mindful of your actions and your reactions. There is a group called the Center for Mindful Eating, and they have a wonderful website that can give you some additional information. And this comes from them. This is their principles of mindful eating. Mindful eating, according to the Center for Mindful Eating, is allowing yourself to become more aware of the positive and nurturing opportunities that are available through food preparation and consumptions by respecting your own inner wisdom. It's choosing to eat food that is both pleasing to you and nourishing to your body by using all of your senses to explore and savor and taste. It's acknowledging your responses to foods, like what you like, maybe I'm kind of neutral about this, and what you dislike without any judgment. Okay. And it's learning to be aware of physical hunger and when you're satiated. Okay. So that you can decide when to eat and stop eating. Most of us have never really experienced hunger. When our tummies start growling, they start growling because we're used to eating certain times of the day. And so if you're used to having your breakfast at 7 o'clock and lunch at 12 o'clock and a snack at 3 o'clock and dinner at 5 o'clock and another snack at 9 p.m., you'll notice that your tummy starts talking to you at those particular times. And that's because you have trained yourself to eat and expect those times of the day that you're going to eat. And so the idea is when you become more mindful about your eating, you begin to ask yourself, am I really hungry? Or is my tummy just growling because I'm used to eating at this time? And when you begin to pick up those clues, then you become more mindful about when you really are hungry, when your body is really calling for food, and maybe taking a walk around the block, running up and down the steps, having a glass of water will satisfy you just as much. So someone who eats mindfully, according to the Center for Mindful Eating, they acknowledge that there's no right or wrong way to eat, but varying degrees of awareness is surrounding the experience of eating food. They accept that your eating experience is unique, and you're mindful when you're eating. You're an individual who, by choice, directs your awareness to all aspects of food on a moment to moment basis. So we're not just sitting down and uh, texting on our phones, scrolling through social media, watching television while we're eating. We know that this is a time where I'm going to sit and bring some nourishment into our bodies. Okay. This is the time where I'm going to take care of myself by nourishing myself through the foods that I eat. All right. A positive attitude. There is an innate drive in all living things to be the best that we can be. This is just natural for us. Being the best you can be begins by taking personal responsibility for your own positive mental health, life current situation, and your overall health. Self-care is key. We as educators, this is the one thing that we focus on, regardless of the age of the children that we're serving, right? Regardless, we are striving to help these little beings be the best that they can be and take personal responsibility for themselves, right? We want them to be able to self-soothe and to make decisions and to learn discernment. And yet we become adults. And this is the one thing that we lose in our own personal responsibility. So we have to come back to that and recognize that that attitude and that curiousness that we have around uh, our own well-being is what affects our mood. Okay, so here's some steps that we can do to keep a positive mood. Now, my neighbor talked about having 100 days of happy. She had this journal, which was a gratitude journal, but she said, you know what? I'm going to have 100 days of happy. And every single day she set about finding something that she could be happy about each particular day. I did this for 2 years in a row. I didn't have 100 days of happy. I had 365 days of gratitude. And every single day I woke up, I wanted to find one thing that I could be grateful for. And it could have been a leaf that I saw that was just beautiful. It could have been a cloud in the sky. It could have been a stranger that I met. But every single day I just set out to say, I'm going to find something each day that I could be grateful for. And I recorded it for 2 years. I did this. And it definitely made a difference in my own outlook. The other thing is become aware of your own self-talk, okay? So try to ask yourself some better questions. Rather than say, why me? Why not try something like, how might I do this differently? Or how might I do this better, right? What do I need to do to gain more enjoyment and happiness in my life? What do I need to commit to doing in order to have more happiness and energy in my life? So rather than have that woe is me, let's have a better attitude about how we talk to ourselves. Try some positive affirmations, okay? So that when we give ourselves positive affirmations, it really does change our desire for certain things. um, Nike says it best, right? They just say, just do it. And they actually say they stole this from Yoda, right? Because he didn't say, he didn't say just do it, but he said, there's no such thing as try, just do it, right? That was no try for Luke Skywalker. You had to do it. And for me, I say it's the same as my motto: do what you can where you are with what you have. Okay, so rather than waiting for the by and by for things to get better, you're here right now. You've got a good brain, you've got a good mind. So just go for it. Begin to do it and see where it takes you. You are perfectly imperfect. So the only way that we can perfect ourselves is to keep moving forward and trying to do the best that we can do. All right. So life is full of events that are beyond our control. We do have control over our responses to these events. Our attitude goes a long way in determining how we view and respond to all of the challenges of our lives. Great. So we're at the end of our PowerPoint. I'm actually going to stop the video and open it up. I'm just going to flash these last two things here. There's a bibliography in here, just so that it's on the recording, and then a list of resources. All righty, so now let me stop my share, but first I want to turn off the, let me do that first. Okay, let me do this first.